Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 25th of August, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date on your local Alaska weather. You can do that easily by calling 1-800-472-0391 or find us online at weather.gov/Alaska. And I believe tonight, if you go to the website, whether it's weather.gov/Anchorage/Juneau or /Fairbanks, your starting points for more localized information. If you look at the top, there'll be a banner there that's talking about weather down in the lower 48. And as you probably know at this point, a Category 4 hurricane called Harvey was making landfall around the Texas coast in their Gulf Coast. If you'd like to learn more about that, follow that link and it will have very impressive information about the hurricane itself, which is a major hurricane, certainly one of the strongest we've seen in quite some time. And you can monitor the progression of that storm, look at radar pictures as well as satellite information there, and just learn more about hurricanes in general. It is a powerful storm, a beautiful storm, and hopefully not too devastating for the Gulf Coast of the lower 48. Anytime you have questions about what you see here on our show, Alaska Weather, or what you're finding on our websites or the Alaska Weather Information Line, or just weather in general, let me know. david.snider@noaa.gov is the easy way to find me. Here's a look at the visible satellite picture now. We have our own low pressure system in our own Gulf here, this area of low pressure south of Kodiak today, slinging another round of rain towards southeastern Alaska, a triple point, a section where the colder air and the warm air are meeting up together here. It's just west of Haida Gwaii, and this is going to create a little bit better lift and probably a heavier rainfall as that passes through areas northward. Are already seeing the front slowly degrade and gradually fall apart. You'll see that in the surface charts in just a little bit. We also have a stationary boundary pretty much hanging right over the Yukon Valley and north of the Alaska Range. That has been the cause for some convection again this afternoon. Up north, high pressure sitting across the Arctic, and because of that, you can see clouds are moving in from north to south through the Bering Strait. Another round of cloud cover and stratus working through the Bering Strait and over St. Lawrence Island. And then some breaks in the cloud cover out toward the west, probably some low clouds we're not picking up very well, and then another frontal boundary working across the western Aleutians, and you can see that gradually spreading eastward. Along with that will be a wave of low pressure that will gradually drop south and east in the coming days and work its way into the Gulf of Alaska. So for right now, plenty of rain around the Gulf Coast, spotty across west and southwestern Alaska, and looking at some light rain and low clouds across the Bering Sea coast of the Alaska Peninsula. By and large, it looks like another wet weekend for many across south central and southeastern coastlines, with some occasional chances for thunder across the central and eastern interior, and even some opportunities for snow in the Brooks Range. Yep, that's right. Snowfall across the Brooks Range, generally above about 3,000 feet, it looks like. Below that, any snow that's falling will probably melt after it reaches the surface there, or a very short order there. Looks like right now a better chance for rainfall that we've seen on our weather sensors around places like Arctic Village up toward Anaktuvuk Pass and Adigan Pass. Here's our stationary boundary separating some of the coldest air from some of the warmer air across the region, and then low pressure just south and east of Seward and just east and south of Homer as well, 992 millibars. Here's the triple point. We have 1, 2, 3. That makes triple right there just south and west of the Haida Gwaii region and the Dixon entrance. And this area usually gets a little bit more lift and helps to develop better chances of rain and sometimes wind as well. This front will gradually die off as it moves north and east, and you can see our ridge is certainly present there just south west of the Gulf of Anadyr in eastern Russia and just south of the central chain there at 1,020 millibars. Here's a look at tonight then. And certainly an opportunity of snow, but remember, if you're around the Brooks Range at all, even around Ambler or Bettles and looking northward going, whoa, that's some snow. Sure, but a lot of that again is going to be up above 3,000 feet, so you don't have to worry about it too much. Below that, probably a better chance of seeing some rainfall here on the south-facing slopes, and areas of light rain and drizzle will still continue, generally east of Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse out toward Kaktovik and Demarcation Point. High pressure up around the Chukchi Sea at 1,021 millibars should lock in areas of fog around Point Barrow and into the Bering Strait region. and then hit and miss as you get around Nunivak Island and into the Bristol Bay region, where periods of rain and drizzle should be found. Low pressure will hover just east of Kodiak Island, 998 millibars, and then there's our front. It's fallen apart and become a trough. That means not much of a temperature difference anymore, a wind shift and a pressure dip, but again, not a big temperature change as that is slowly creeping, if not even just hovering right there along the outer coast of southeast. So showers and clouds will continue for you, and that's pretty much the norm, isn't it? Low pressure out across the western Bering at 991 millibars. That too has an occluded front there, so the warm and the cold air have now caught up to each other and slowly creeping eastward. Winds are going to pick up a little bit more across the central and western chain as they're running into high pressure for the central Bering. That's not going to move very much, but you'll see we don't track it on the map anymore after Sunday. Looks for areas of some fog out across regions west of the Pribilofs and St. Matthew. Here's our front now moving just north and east of the Aleutian chain in the west. It's still crawling through Adak and Atka, so winds will be switching around there on the marine charts. You'll see that as we get through Saturday and Sunday's maps. And low pressure still in the Gulf. It still has moisture wrapped into it, so we're still going to be talking about rain around Prince William Sound for the weekend and into southeastern Alaska. The pressure gradient is not too terribly strong here. The winds will be moving around a little bit, but watch for periods of showers there at least through Saturday and probably into Sunday. And there's an opportunity for at least a little bit of extra lift in the atmosphere to create some showers and thunderstorms along the Alaska Range. Probably a little more of that will be closer to the region of low pressure here, closer to Eagle and generally north of Northway. Now up north, one thing to keep an eye on is the pressure gradient across the Brooks Range. That does seem to tighten up, so winds may come up a little bit more around the Brooks Range summits. And remember, we're talking about that snow line that's close to about 3,000 feet. Above that, as you get into the weekend, you may come up with 3 to 4 inches of snow, but that's up there. That's not down in Ambler or Bettles or Anaktuvik Pass, down the pass, I should say. In the pass around Adigan and Anaktuvik Pass, there's a possibility you will see snow up there. High pressure up across the Arctic at 1,021 millibars will keep the fog going across most of the coastal regions up north. The ice way north right now. However, if you haven't had a chance to look at the outlook there, as we're moving towards some of the lowest concentration periods of the season, take a look at that at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice and check on the outlook. You can read more about when the ice is expected to start to make its return here. So we're thinking ahead just a little bit. Out west, 989 millibar low there, slowly working its way westward there on Sunday. 1,006 millibar low across the Alcan border, and the low still present in the northern Gulf, 1,011 millibars. And we have another surge of low pressure working its way through the Dixon entrance, 1,016 millibars. Not terribly strong, but you see that circulation again will add more clouds and more wet and warm weather northward into southeast. So the showers will continue for you. They may break up a little bit more around the Cook Inlet region in the western Alaska Range and certainly along the west coast. We'll keep the clouds, but the showers should diminish more and more on the western side of this overall circulation. Out across the west, our frontal boundary is gone. We've still got a disturbance here in the west, but more showers and clouds than any organized wind, it looks like. If we have any stronger winds, it'll probably focus around the central and eastern chain as well as the Alaska Peninsula out toward the Shumagon Islands and Sand Point. That is a look at Sunday, and yes, it does look like a few snowflakes may creep up on the coast there for the Beaufort Seacoast with areas of fog there on Sunday afternoon. Here's a look at temperatures today, and we saw readings generally in the lower to mid-50s for southeast, all the way from Haines and Skagway to the capital city at 55. Upper 50s as you head down toward Clarence Strait, mid-50s for either end of Haida Gwaii, 55 around Yakutat, low to mid-50s for Prince William Sound, 56 in Kenai, 56 as well for Homer, 52 in Seward, upper 50s around Anchorage, 56 in Wasilla, lower 60s for Talkeetna today, about 62 around Fairbanks, 61 around Eagle. It was in the upper 50s for parts of Fort Yukon. And then look at that. You can certainly tell the difference of that other side of the front, can't you? The cold air starts to show up on the map around Arctic Village, 37 in Anaktuvik Pass, 40s for the Beaufort Seacoast, Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse at 41, Barrow at 37. Heading down toward Wainwright and toward Point Hope and Point Lay. Lower 40s did the trick today. Kivalina 47, Kotzebue 51, cooler in Shishmaref, and our friends in Nome say 53 this afternoon. Galena was 53 degrees. McGrath, a much warmer 63 this afternoon. 10 degrees colder than that, though. In Bethel, hello to everyone out there. 45 around St. Lawrence Island and Savunga. Lake Iliamna was in the upper 50s. And down toward the Alaska Peninsula, we saw 51 around Sand Point and Cold Bay and Falls Pass also made it into the lower 50s today, right at the 50-degree mark for St. Paul and St. George. Glad to see St. George on the map again. 51 in Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, and out west, low to mid 50s all day long. Here to look at the temperatures for tonight. Lower 50s in southeast, south central, upper 40s, the middle Tanana Valley, and most of the central interior back in the upper 40s. For the Brooks Range and northward, there's one temperature that really sticks out. That's AKwx Pass, isn't it? 28 degrees, that's cold stuff. Lower to mid 30s for the North Slope, Kotzebue Sound in the upper 30s. Norton Sound temperatures in the lower 40s around Unalakleet, 43 around St. Paul, upper 40s to almost 50 for Bristol Bay, and pretty close to that for places like Sandpoint and areas out west. High temperatures tomorrow back in the mid 60s around the middle Tanana Valley, even westward toward Tanana itself. The Parks Highway in the lower 60s, including places like Willow and Houston. As you get into south central and a little bit further south, even into the Kenai Peninsula, those temps will cool off, especially as you make it down toward Homer and Kenai and probably Seward in the upper 50s. You'll see upper 50s for most of southeast. Tomorrow at Haines about 56, Sitka 58, Ketchikan, Annette, Metlakatla closer to 60 degrees in fact. Look for Eagle at 64. The Bristol Bay temperatures in the upper 50s tomorrow and low to mid 50s for the chain. St. Paul and St. George right about 50 degrees. And St. Lawrence Island, Savunga, Gamble, you're probably looking at 49 with Barrow at 37 for your Saturday. On to flying weather now. IFR conditions are expected across the North Slope tomorrow. Watch out for some areas of snow and then snow above 3,000 feet again. Out west, patchy IFR across the western chain and around Prince William Sound and Porter's Pass in the morning, and hit and miss across the inside waters there for southeast. Otherwise, MVFR to start your morning. That should improve as you go through the afternoon. So if you want to hold off on have another biscuit and some eggs and bacon there, you might do okay to wait a little bit longer in the afternoon to see some VFR. But IFR could stick around up north around Haines and Skagway and into Glacier Bay, and also inland a little bit more around Yakutat. Now in the afternoon on the western Alaska Range and probably around the Rainy Pass region, better chance for some convection to fire up in the afternoon, so keep your eyes on that. Otherwise, VFR to the east and to the west for Norton Sound, and IFR remains across the Brooks Range and out across the western and central chain tomorrow. Here's your pass conditions. AKwx Pass, we expect to see that lean over toward IFR, so worsening conditions there throughout the day, and the same goes for Adigan Pass. So put down the coffee in the morning and get going if you have to. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, MVFR conditions are expected there through most of the day. Watch out for convection again as you head out toward Rainy Pass. MVFR conditions and marginal also for Windy Pass, but a lesser chance for the convection in that region. Make sure you check the charts in the morning just in case. Isabel Pass, marginal conditions through the day. Mentasta Pass, visual flight roll through the morning, but then changing conditions in the afternoon. Tanita Pass, we expect to see MVFR, and Portage Pass, at least MVFR. There could be some IFR around Prince William Sound again with the rain in the region, so keep your eye on that. Chilkoot and White Pass looks like IFR through most of the day. Southward should be okay. Freezing levels, we see a cold pocket sitting at across the Gulf of Alaska. Levels there between 6, 8, and 10,000 feet through most of the Panhandle. Up north, you don't see a whole lot of change until you get north of the Yukon and into the Brooks Range there with levels anywhere from 2 to 6,000 feet. And remember, snow above 3,000 feet should be an issue. Surface freezing line right there touching the Arctic coast, and then we see that colder air trying to descend down toward the Yukon Delta, and then much warmer air as you get west of Nikolsky all the way out toward looks like Shemya and Adak. You're looking at levels between 10 and about 12,000 feet for your start on Saturday. Icing potential, yeah, we have a lot of moisture out there, but those levels are still pretty high. So it looks like for most areas, you'll have to go to about 6 to 8,000 feet up north, and then 8 to about 10,000 feet as you get down toward southwestern Alaska. You could run into some occasional moderate there if you get into a deeper patch of the moisture, but many areas north of south central and into the central and eastern interior probably are still on the drier side of that, and you'll have some moisture generally lurking around the higher train of southeast above 8,000 feet, and then out west again, that's pretty high stuff above 10,000 feet. So keep your eyes on the icing potential as you go through your daytime tomorrow. Here's the jet stream. This is the main driver of the weather around the entire planet, and in the northern hemisphere we get winds that are generally blowing from west to east. In this case, we have descending air coming out of the pole and heading in toward the Gulf of Alaska. This is running around 60 knots or so, and then curving northward once again toward southeast between 80 and 130 knots. So this here is creating the spin that we see on the satellite picture over all of Alaska. Pretty impressive stuff, and it's not moving very much, so we're stuck in this wet weather from many places. Out west, we have the main driver of kind of what would change the weather system around Alaska. and that is being pushed to the south. So this isn't moving. This wants to move it, but isn't doing a great job. So we've got 80 to 140 knots there on the south side of this overall weather system sitting over most of Alaska at this hour. At 9,000 feet, you can see underneath that circulation, we have several other areas of low pressure trying to do the same thing. This isn't moving either. We have north and easterly winds coming down the Chukchi coast into the Bering Sea, 20 to 25 knots, and then we get into that west and southwesterly flow that's pushing a lot of moisture towards southeast, 20 to 30 knots across southeast. Generally light winds at 9,000 feet for most of the interior, and north and easterly winds over the Brooks Range with a stronger westerly push just south of the chain, 35 to 50 knots. You can see the little bit of a different orientation of that trough of low pressure here across the western chain, 25 to 40 knots around low pressure there. You'll remember there's a front right here at the surface as well. And then we get those several circulations across the mainland, anywhere from 5 to 25 knots on the north and western side. That's usually the stronger side here, pulling in that colder air. 15 to 20 as you get over Nome and the Bering Strait region, and then back into that south and southwesterly flow for southeast, anywhere from 5 to 20 knots there. Turbulence, we're going to focus on the western Brooks Range below 4,000 feet. Might run into some chop there, and for St. Lawrence Island, and also across the western chain. Everywhere else, it's rain, clouds, snow, and visibility, so keep your eye on that. We'll take a look at your marine weather here in just a few minutes. Stay with us.
It's important for us as pilots to recognize that there's a very delicate balance that exists in our recreation or our field of career or whatever else it may be. Are there some professional pilots in the crowd? Are pretty well all general aviation? Is there a mix? Who flies for a living? Couple? Anybody fly helicopters? Anybody a rotary wing pilot? Joel? Oh, sit up front so I don't have to talk loud. Okay? Yeah. Now, I hate to make jokes about helicopter pilots. They have enough trouble, don't they? All those moving parts. Holy cow. Now, when I talk about the delicate balance that exists here, what I mean is you have a specific reason to go flying. That's the mission, if you would. There's a certain airplane that you're going to use. That's the machinery involved that you're going to use. It must fit the job, okay? 2 people in a 2-seat airplane, that fits the job, right? This used to be a big thing with agriculture spraying, crop spraying. If they're using the right machinery, it works pretty well. Super Cubs with wire cutters and so on aren't really the best way to go. Further to that, the aircraft must be in the proper environment, and the simplest example of that would be a VFR-equipped aircraft with respect to instruments and radios in an IFR environment. It is just not going to work. Now, further to that, the pilot. By statistics, they're going to say that's the weak part of the equation, if you would, because the majority of aircraft accidents are pilot error. Now, we don't use that term anymore. They got more sophisticated, and we say things like the pilot failed too, or whatever else. I don't like that particularly, because if you turn the scenario around, we'll find that 100% of the flights that ended successfully also had a pilot on board. So the accident investor may say that the pilot is the weakness in the equation. I say it's a strength, because you have the responsibility and the authority that goes with it to say, this aircraft does not fit this environment, or I don't fit the environment with that aircraft or any combination thereof. You have to do that, okay? Now, I'm not going to talk about this anymore, because I think if you keep a picture of this in the back of your mind, that a lot of what I talk about a little later here will make a bit more sense. We have a poster that says that a superior pilot is one that uses superior judgment, blah, blah, blah. Again, you get the feeling that I don't necessarily need to have skill as well, but you do, okay? And I'll just make that point one more time, and that's the last time that I'll mention it. I have about 5 slides that define pilot judgment. There's probably as many definitions of judgment as there are people in this room. We think of it as common sense or horse sense or whatever else. All of those things are difficult to define. But I think that this one probably fits us as pilots better than any other that I've seen, so that's what I'm going to use. Pilot judgment is a process that infers that there's some action taking place, of recognizing all available information, emphasis on the word all, about those three things I just mentioned in the equation: the aircraft, ourselves, and the environment in which we're operating. And you need to know everything you possibly can about those, followed by the rational evaluation of alternatives. Now, emphasis on the plural there, alternatives. That's to implement timely decisions, which is also very important, that will maximize safety. Now, that's quite a mouthful, all right? But there's three very important things to remember there: that we have a rational evaluation of alternatives, timely decision making, and maximum safety. Not just come up with some sort of a decision based on a wild guess that might work sometimes. That just isn't good enough. So we're going to aim for the bullseye all the time. Pilot decision making, judgment, if you would, thus involves one's attitude towards risk taking. Attitude is a very, very important thing, and we're going to talk about attitudes as well this evening as we go. And more importantly, it's that pilot's ability to make decisions, and those decisions are based upon your level of knowledge, of skill, and of experience. Those three famous things, if you would. Now, again, like judgment, these are like three separate bank accounts. You can't trade one for the other. You have to maintain a healthy balance in each one, all right? Most accidents, now here I am, it seems like I'm dwelling on the negative, but that's the hard evidence. When an aircraft accident occurs, very seldom do we find that it was a lack of skill, okay? Most often pilots have the level of skill required. Knowledge may have been a little bit weak, or probably the combination of machine and environment wasn't just quite right. But you do have to maintain a balance. You can't trade one for the other. The person that's extremely skillful with the aircraft that doesn't understand the airspace structure or air traffic control clearances is not a complete professional pilot. Okay? And we are all supposed to be professionals.
Here's a look at today's sea ice edge, and we're not quite to the minimum yet. In fact, we probably have several weeks before we get to that point, but it's worth noting that the main ice is well away from the Arctic coast. In fact, from Barrow, the nearest concentration of ice that's into the marginal ice zone is about 250 nautical miles to the north. If you go from demarcation point, the Canadian line, or just east of Kaktovik, it's about 100 nautical miles to the north and northeast. Overall, the ice is not expected to move around too much. We have some different and changing winds up across the north, but it doesn't look like any of this will be drifting southward in any big way anytime soon. However, one thing you can do, if you'd like to learn more about what the expectations are for the coming weeks there, check out weather.gov/Anchorage/ice and go to the Outlook section there. That'll tell you a little bit more about when things are expected to freeze up. And as you can probably tell already, sea surface temperatures there have been warmer than normal for a large part of the season. Ice conditions have gone away faster than previous years, and so at this point I'll give you one teaser. It looks like the ice may return later by a week or so than in previous summers there, especially last summer, so something to keep in mind. Here's a look at southeast. Southeasterly winds across the inside waters there. Stevens Passage, Clarence Strait, about 20 knots or so, 4 to 5 foot seas there into the Lynn Canal, 25 knots with a southerly flow, and southwesterly south of Sitka with 6 to 7 foot seas there on Saturday. As you get into Sunday, more of an offshore flow around Craig and Metlakatla, 20 knots there with a 9 foot sea, southerlies up the outer coast, and winds diminish in some areas across the inside waters, 15 knots with 3 foot seas from north to south on your Sunday. For south central, winds will be fairly light. Southeasterlies inside of Prince William Sound, 10 knots with a 2 foot sea. Light winds in Cook Inlet from the south, 10 knots there, up to 3 foot seas at times. And west of the Barrens, an easterly flow, 15 knots with 3 foot seas. And northwesterlies crossing Kodiak Island, 10 knots with 2 foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait and 7 foot seas east of Kodiak Island. For Sunday, look for an east and northeasterly flow across the northern Gulf. Small seas inside Prince William Sound. Easterlies, though, could bring seas up to 7 feet just outside. Northeasterlies will descend Cook Inlet there, 10 knots with 2-foot seas. South and easterlies over the Barrens, and southwesterlies east of Kodiak, 15 knots with a 4-foot sea on Sunday. For Bristol Bay, you're looking at northwesterlies on Saturday, 5-foot seas. The winds will be a little bit stronger down the Bering Sea coast, up to 7-foot seas there, and 7-foot seas on the Pacific coast as well, with a little bit more of a westerly flow between Castle Cape and Chignik for Saturday. For Sunday, a westerly flow there will continue just south of Kodiak Island. Southerlies inside of Bristol Bay with 3-foot seas, 4-foot seas down the coast, and southwesterlies around Sandpoint, King Cove, and Falls Pass with a 4-foot sea on Sunday. For the Aleutians, south and westerly winds there west of Adak, 30 knots with 8 to 12-foot seas. You get into more of a southeasterly flow being drawn into low pressure out to your west, 15 to 30 knots there. And for the eastern chain, more of a northwesterly flow between Unalaska and Nikolsky, 15 to 20 knots with 5 to 6-foot seas, as that frontal boundary hasn't quite pushed through that region. But now, as the front is working its way eastward, we still get air being drawn into the weather system. But here's the front now. You can see the winds converging right here between Atka and just west of Nikolsky. 15 to 20 knots across the Bering Sea coast, 20 to 25 on the Pacific coast, and 7 to 8-foot seas there, with west and southwesterlies out west, 20 knots with an 8 to 10-foot sea on Sunday. For the west coast, northerlies are going to wind 20 to 25 knots south of St. Lawrence Island, northwesterlies south of Nunivak Island, and St. Paul and St. George are looking at 15 knots with a 5-foot sea on Saturday. As you get into Sunday, a little bit more of an easterly flow coming across, 15 knots, light winds with a 4-foot sea, and northeasterlies for St. Lawrence Island and St. Matthew, and 10 to 15 knots on either side of Nunivak Island and into the Kuskokwim Delta with 4-foot seas for Sunday. For the North Slope, northeasterlies across the Beaufort Sea, 15 to 20 with 4-foot seas there, and northeasterlies down the Chukchi coast, 20 to 25 with 5 to 8-foot seas outside of Kotzebue Sound. Still looking at a north and northeasterly flow for most of the region, 10 to 15 for the Beaufort Sea coast, 2-foot seas around Point Barrow, and the Chukchi coast looking at 20 to 25 with 5 to 6-foot seas for your Sunday afternoon. Here's a quick recap of the weather around Alaska tonight. Rain's going to continue for south central and southeast as the frontal boundary pushes into southeast and gradually falls apart. There's going to be snow across the Brooks Range, generally above 3,000 feet though. Below that you may see a snowflake or two, but it should melt off fairly quickly. Watch for areas of fog, drizzle, and poor visibility at times across the North Slope and the coastal regions into the Bering Strait. And a front will be dying as it moves across the Aleutians as we go through your Sunday. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. Have a great weekend.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.